Welcome back, friends, to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best works and movements within our united progressive circles. Today, just like we had done last week, we're continuing our new series, our Me Plus Three, where we bring on three of our friends from the progressive circles to be able to discuss either the topics of the day or specific policy subjects. As we had done last week, we had two groups come on and be able to react to the debates pretty much closely right after as live reactions as we could. But then we wanted to, instead of giving you a third debate reaction, we saved our group for today to actually give you what their more digested form, seeing the polling reactions from the general public after these events. So we have our three friends on today, EPluribus Unum, Progressive Blacksmith, as well as Scotty Cameron. So, guys, I just want you to introduce yourselves to the friends out there, how you want them to know you, where you're from, as well as what you do. So, EPluribus, do you want to kick us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you think differed from your expectation from how the general public reacted?
Okay, so my name is Fernando. I live in North Carolina, a swing state, so my opinion matters. And I'll be a student in August, mostly for poli sci, no duh. And just as of right now, this whole YouTube thing is my bread and butter. And well, my initial reactions were just the average stuff like, oh, of course, Kamala and Warren are going to do better. And, well, they did. And the only big expectation otherwise was me, much like every other progressive, was kind of like, hey, maybe this guy might do well, or this guy. And then, well, their mics were cut, so they didn't do so hot. But, I mean, some of the polling is kind of, again, kind of a little skewed if you look at the specifics, but I was clearly indicating that there is momentum behind Kamala and Warren, and Sanders gets a little bit of a bump because he's Bernie. But that's just my in general kind of view on this.
Okay. I tend to agree with you. I think we saw Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren have the biggest upshoot in their poll numbers after the debates. But the only other two that actually even went up at all were Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang. But I think the largest increase, as we saw, at least according to a Reuters poll a couple of days ago, was the increase in people saying, I just don't know. So, Scotty, do you think this debate helped add more clarity to the situation, or do you think it added more confusion of who the top people in this race are going to be, as well as just tell the Rosebuds out there a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Scotty Cameron. I live in Kansas, a very solid red state, so my opinion will not affect the election whatsoever. And I work at a pizza joint for a living. My YouTube channel is just a spare time activity, and I attend community college where I study political science and U.S. history. As far as the debates and like what clarity came, I think a lot more people will like. I think on the issue of healthcare, well, it's a bit confusing because of how that question was framed, a anti-Medicare for all perspective. So some people who would you'd expect to be tough on healthcare, like Tulsi, ended up not raising their hands nor like come back the way the question was framed. And then some people who were like waffly or just backtrack, like Kamala, raised their hand and then backtracked the very next day because of how bad the question was, but I don't think that's why she backtracked. And so I do think there's like a bit more confusion because of how the questions in the debate were framed and like where the candidates stand because as of how like especially on healthcare the question was framed so poorly and there were a bunch of like gotcha questions like that one Maddow asked Bernie about guns.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you in the sense that the running of the events by NBC as well as MSNBC had a lot of questions that are going to be very obfuscated if you just have a hand raising question. I think almost all of those were almost to the detriment of the party. As much as we can all be compassionate individuals saying, yes, these Medicare programs that we're going to extend health services to should cover some undocumented immigrants, especially if they're taxpayers. Trump immediately latched on to that hand raising moment and said, yep, this is going to be something we're going to use. Every single one of them raised their hands. So, like it or not, it's going to be something that they try and use as a rallying cry because you couldn't add nuance to it. So, Progressive Blacksmith, do you agree with how the events kind of unfolded in this polling? And do you think that they actually ran a good debates?
So, my name is Kevin Asani. I am the Progressive Blacksmith. I host my own progressive podcast called The Progressive Square. I'm pretty new to this game, so I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm newer than you guys, but I've only been doing it for about 3 months or so consistently, 2-3 months, and I live in the state of California where all the glitzy, glamoury celebrities are, and I don't think my vote is going to mean shit. So. As far as your question, I think, what was the question again about the polls?
Yeah, how do you think your reaction of how the debates unfolded compared to the results from polling, which had like Warren, Kamala, Bernie, and Yang as the only people going up, and everyone else going
Yeah,
down?
honestly, I mean, I think that's kind of how we expected it to go based on the fact that those are the people that got the most attention during the debate. And I think those are the people that got the most time to speak. Not so much Andrew Yang, but there were like a couple people like Kirsten Gillibrand on the second night, and on the first night, Bill de Blasio, who they were kind of speaking a lot more. They were interrupting a lot of questions. They were trying to get their name and their voices heard out there a lot more, but they didn't really get a lot of bump in the polls. But the media, as Pluribus was mentioning, they were definitely latching on a lot more to certain politicians, and they were saying like, well, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, the way they framed the questions. I think they were just trying to make the polls go in certain ways, and I think they were successful at that.
Yeah, I could totally see it being kind of a guided reaction to these
Yeah.
people. Guys, I actually want to know, do you think that it's important for these candidates to be aggressive on stage and wait for their moment? Or do you think the strategies of more trying to be reserved and being within the rules is more the approach that they should be looking to do towards the end of this month? What do you think, Fernando?
Well, some candidates, it would benefit them more if they stayed reserved and quiet like Joe Biden, because as Secular Talk says, the more he talks, the more people realize, hey, I don't like him. But candidates like Bill de Blasio or Tulsi Gabbard or Yang or Williamson, for that matter, should definitely get more aggressive, because in the 2016 election, Bernie was a bit more aggressive in some regards, and, well, now he's kind of the big progressive guy, the one that everybody's kind of latching on to. Well, I mean, unless you're one of those Nico House Tulsi people. So otherwise, it's better if they get more aggressive.
Yeah, I tend to agree, especially when you have this amount of people on stage, 10 people for 2 hours, and then you have people like Chuck Todd consuming the rest of the hours. I think you need to kind of make your own moments out there to actually even find time to speak, because if you're getting rushed into these answers where you have to answer a complex problem in 45 seconds, you're going to just look flustered out there. So you kind of have to make your moments. And I think that's kind of why Kamala did well, is she was like, we're going to give you 30 seconds to speak, no more. And then she immediately attacked Joe Biden, and it became a 3 to 4 minute segment of them just going back and forth on like segregated busing. So I got to ask, so Scotty, who do you think are the people that need to be trying to be more aggressive going into the July debates?
I think Andrew Yang definitely needs to be more aggressive, because he's at a point where his debate performances could affect his polling to either help him bump up into a top tier candidate or like put him below 1%. And like that first debate, He just basically came out and said something very basic, like, my UBI program will do this and accommodate basic needs, where he should be selling it more aggressively on the debate stage where more people are watching. Now, one thing I will say is that he does tend to like co-opt his message depending on what program he's on. Like Rubin's program, he sold it as more of like a libertarian program, and on TYT he sold it as a progressive program. And I think he should use that moment on the debate stage to establish this is a progressive or libertarian program, and this is why, and this could help like boost his support among like more conservative leaning voters or more progressive leaning voters to push him up into like the Buttigieg, Harris, and Warren area.
Yeah, I tend to agree, especially when you get only 2 minutes and 45 seconds worth of talking. I think any moment you can try and interject and get your bread and butter UBI idea out there, and getting people to your website to see all the rest of his like policies, which I think are in the hundreds now. I think that's really what he's got to do, is just build any interest. But I think it was actually kind of interesting having the opposite approach. Him getting such little time drew attention to him and had this whole anti-media bias. Progressive Blacksmith, do you think it's important to try and be showing that you do have some like favoritism in the media because you get mentioned more? Or do you think it's helpful to reach these more independent voices who are disattached from the media, who think it's more negative if they're against you, that could be a positive in your favor?
Yeah, that's a tough question. That's a tough question to answer because you don't know who you're going to hand the mic over to next, or the opportunity next. I mean, when they were talking to somebody like Marianne Williamson, she was honestly giving some strange responses, but she got attention from that. And some of her responses were okay, but then she started talking about how Donald Trump says certain things, and then we need to kind of mimic him in a way, or something. She said something along those lines, and it was just a little strange. So but yeah, I don't think it hurts to do that because you do have to give the people exposure at some point. And somebody like Bernie obviously doesn't need that much exposure, but his ideas do. So his ideas need to definitely get out there and get out there more in the mainstream. And obviously they got a lot of attention when he wasn't even there in that first debate. And then when he got there in the second debate, they weren't really pouncing on him that much. I'm saying as far as the candidates weren't pouncing on him that much, while the questions from the moderators were a little bit more skewed and they were a little bit more biased. So that was a little bit of a thing that stood out to me. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just weird when you give voices to somebody like, Yang or Williamson, or even somewhere as far as like Swalwell, who's seems like a little bit of a opportunistic hack to me, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I could see sometimes having this large of a field, the people just trying to do anything to get exposure and people to look them up. It might cause some desperate tactics like jokes falling flat for Swalwell to the point of cringe, Williamson being a love guru of talking to the spirituality of us all, and then Yang just not speaking essentially at all.
Apparently Tulsi got a lot of attention after the debate, and she was Googled like crazy, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So that's good. I think that's a good thing.
I think that says something to her second half of the debate performance compared to the first half. I think there is a lot of actually memes going on from like liberal circles compared to the progressive circles of like, you have those jokes like Family Guy where you have Lois campaigning and just saying 9/11. And Tulsi just coming out there and not answering the question on equal pay and just going into her military background. A lot of people who didn't know her and wasn't on her team already kind of was like laughing at that a little. But her decimating Tim Ryan and giving strong answers towards the progressive future, I think, was a good recovery. So I'm curious now, like expanding beyond just this debate, kind of more to the campaign trail and these kind of stated goals that the party is kind of universally trying to get their heads behind. I think there's like a general list of goals. The policies are where they all just fall in different paths. I'm wondering if you guys think we need to expand what the general Democratic philosophy is, or if we need to kind of focus down more like the Republicans have with just saying, we're going to cut taxes, we're going to do abortion, we're going to protect your guns, and we're going to get immigrants out of here. They kind of honed in the message, or do we need to broaden the platform? I kind of see 16 goals here. So just we'll go through these 16 and you tell me, do you think we need to build more on this or hone down? So the first is universal, cheaper healthcare, including drug prices. The second is gun control, at least universal background checks and an assault weapons ban. The third has been addressing climate change in some way. The fourth has been lowering student debt. The fifth has been pro-choice movement. The sixth is a pathway to citizenship as well as ending our child separation policies. The seventh is supporting unions. The eighth is increasing public teacher pay. The ninth has been supporting the LGBTQ community. The 10th is increasing infrastructure spending. The 11th is raising the minimum wage. The 12th is, ending the Trump tax cuts and making the wealthy pay their fair share, at least in rhetoric they say this. The 13th is ending systematic racism. The 14th is rural broadband internet. The 15th is protecting voting rights. And the 16th is combating the opioid epidemic. So, EPluribus Unum. Do you think we need to be a more broad policy and broad focus party so that we get more niches served and more done? Or do you think we need to have a more crystallized message and have less policies that we are prioritizing?
More policies are inevitably good for everyone because then you'll know what the people stand for. The problem really is the fact that you need to get everybody on the same page, and the Democratic Party isn't that good at doing it. They've always kind of tried to build themselves up as, no, we're a big tent party, and we need to be accepting that. So there's some pro-life Democrats like Dan Lipinski. We gotta accept the fact that he's pro-life. We can't just have a pro-choice candidate replace him because we need to keep our group together. We need to keep our team on the same line. It doesn't matter if we have the same message or not. But if you don't, say for the Republicans, there are some more moderate or libertarian ones that don't agree on everything, but on the meat of the issues, like lowering taxes, they'll all agree and vote the same. Whereas with the Democratic Party, if you get something that is important relatively, like a universal health care, let's say Medicare for All does go through the House of Representatives. Who's going to vote for it? Are all the Democrats going to vote for it? No, because they don't all agree on it. So we need to get the party to actually acknowledge, yes, we need to go forward with these policies. We need to, unite behind all of these great policies, and you got to give them punishments if they don't follow through.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think sometimes a goal is nice, but that just comes down to the language. I think a lot of the people, at least in the progressive movements, have been begging for, let's give us specifics, let's not worry just about these platitudes. You get counter arguments from the people like Pete Buttigieg who say we need to make this new philosophical argument of what we stand for. Scotty, I wanted to know, do you agree with EPluribus Unum that we have to be, more specific in our policies, as well as have more policies on the table?
Oh, I completely agree, actually. And I think one of the things that makes the Republicans so successful is that, in the end of the day, they all agree on their policies. Now, they may question whether some of the Republicans running for office actually believe those things, but the Republicans who run for office generally know, hey, my voters want me to cut taxes, even if it's not their taxes that's actually being cut. And that's why they were successful in 2016, is because I live in a deep red state, so I saw Republicans ripping their heads off saying, if Trump wins, the independent voters will vote for Hillary. We got to elect Bush. Or if Cruz wins, they'll support Hillary. We got to elect Rubio. But then once the nominee was settled, they all rallied behind Trump because they knew he was at least going to appeal and at least pay lip service to this agenda that they all supported. Whereas with the Democrats, there were a lot of policies that Hillary would not support that Bernie was campaigning on. Like, she dismissed the idea of Medicare for All and said it was pie in the sky. And so the Bernie supporters were like, well, I'm not sure if she's going to support this agenda. Now, they by and large went behind Hillary because they knew Trump was going to completely obliterate what progress they had made, but there was like, I don't know, I really don't like Hillary. And there wasn't like this rally cry behind Hillary that there was behind Trump.
So let me get that straight. So I hear that you're agreeing
Yeah.
that we need to be more specific. But it sounds
Mhm.
like in this Republican movement, they do all this bickering, but the party ideas are kind of these few issues. And they can all agree on these few, and then, you know what? Who cares about the rest of the policies? Let's just fall in line. While there's this more internal disagreement between the left. Do you think we need to actually hone in on what is the litmus test and reduce this list?
Yes, I do, but we cannot narrowly define it like what David Pakman and Kyle Kalinske warn about, is that if we too narrowly define it, we'll eventually eliminate allies.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense to me because you have to be able to serve all of these different communities who have different needs. But Progressive Blacksmith, what do you think? Do we need to be having a larger agenda as a party that is more specific, or do you think we need to focus more on crystallizing the message of what are those top priorities?
I think we need to. I think we definitely need to take the Kyle Kalinske approach of pushing as much of a progressive agenda as possible, but catering a lot to the middle class and working people, black, white, Hispanic, all kinds of demographics. And if you look at when you look at Bernie's plans and what he wants to do economically, what he wants to do, I would say even geopolitically when it comes to foreign policy and everything, those are two issues that are really important to me. I think he's doing really well in connecting well to the progressive community in that regard, and that's why he gets so much praise from at least people like myself, speaking for myself. But when it comes to when you see something like somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who I think she's just kind of like she's almost like a clone of Bernie Sanders mixed in with a bunch of Democratic strategists who are incompetent at their jobs and just want to they want to obsess everything with optics. And I just don't think it works. But Bernie, I mean, he's got his flaws, but he's not going to be a sellout, and he's not going to be giving away the farm just to appease a bunch of Republicans. And I can't stand these Dan Lipinski types, these, Joe Manchin. I can't stand those pricks because I don't think they're moral. They're not moral actors. It's just I don't know. I just can't stand those people. They piss me off. So
Yeah, I can hear you on that. I actually wonder what is it a policy front that makes you trust them, or is it the actual words that they say, I support this, but then they actually don't vote and show up to support that? What do you think, EPluribus Unum? Do you think this is more of a policy front on the party that we just don't trust them, or is it we say one thing, but then we have a private position that's different?
Well, it's a bit of both. Like, you can say all you want, like, I support this, this, and this, but if you don't actually support it, well, it's just words. It's just hot air. Like, for example, Tulsi's early career, she's been, like, a lot anti-gay, but her record shows otherwise. Yeah, she said, oh, the gay people, I don't like them, but her voting record shows really pro-LGBT stuff and a lot of other regards. But the problem with most of these Democrats is, well, they are open about the fact that they don't support this, this, and this. But some also try to be the wolf in sheep's clothing, like Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. Like, oh, I support single payer. Oh, wait, did I say that? I meant to say this. And they're just kind of being iffy. Even people that are kind of well known with progressivism, like Elizabeth Warren, she's trying to be the sheep disguised as a wolf, disguised as a sheep. She's just all over the place. So we need to be just straightforward and mean what we say. And a lot of progressives are like that. They say what they say. They don't care if they're in a deep red state. They'll say, I support Medicare for all. And If you don't support that, well, okay, then don't vote for me.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think a lot of these people, especially Kamala, just from these recent debates, because as we were talking about with the hand raising, it's one thing to have the optic, ooh, I raised my hand that day, but when you walk it back the literal next day on a cable news show, what good is that moment? It just shows, as you were saying, the wolf in sheep's clothing. So, Scotty, do you think it's really we need them to show that they are ideologically in sync with us more often? Or at least be honest actors with what their beliefs are? What do you think is the bigger problem with the democratic trust issue?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think what we need is for those who are in sync to be open and honest, because I genuinely think Elizabeth Warren is, but she doesn't want to lose like some of those mainstream Democrats, those like more centrist types in her base, and her consultants say you really need them, but then but then she'll come out with like student loan forgiveness, which attracts like progressive voters, and so it's like I get like conflicting messages from her. I genuinely think she's on our side, but then there are like these mixed messages like I'm not sure if she's going to fight as hard as Bernie would, whereas someone like Kamala Harris will say one thing to the voters and then one thing to her donors. And if she were more honest, one, we'd know where she is, and two, she'd be down there with Cloud Bouchard and Seth Moulton.
Yeah.
So she doesn't want to be honest because that's what's getting her up there with Bernie and Biden, is being dishonest about where she is. And I think with Warren, it's like a mix. Like she's honest about these very progressive policies like student loan forgiveness, which she was pushing for back in 2013, but that at the same time, she's waffling on Medicare for all. And so she was like, well, the centrists say we got to take it easy on that. Whereas like with student loan forgiveness, there's this huge epidemic, and I think that's one of her babies. And so with Wall Street and student loans, it's like, I have to be consistent on these issues. Whereas like others, it's like, well, I don't want to lose these voters. And the people who run our campaign are like, you can't lose those voters. You gotta reach some middle ground. Whereas like I genuinely think she doesn't agree with that, but she's playing coy because her strategists are experts in the field. Whereas Bernie's like upfront about this, and that's why people liked him and why he did so well in 2016 and why he's doing so well now is he's open and honest, and he's been fighting for this for his entire life.
Yeah. I think there was two really interesting points that you made there. One was first, like Warren, it's the whole trust factor thing of playing to her Democratic strategists. I think the biggest issue, at least that I saw from the debate stage that made me think about this, was they had the hand-raising question on whether or not you would want to eliminate private insurance, and that was a moment where she raised her hand, kind of for the first time truly signaling, I want some single-payer type system.
And then she said, I'm with Bernie.
Yeah, and that she was with Bernie. But then if you look back, I think it was like 3 days beforehand, they had this series on the New York Times where they asked each of the Democratic candidates 20 questions, and they asked specifically on single payer. And Elizabeth Warren said, yeah, there's all these paths here. And she's been constantly waffling. So for me, Warren is really, do I trust you? Like, I feel like she has been listening to this DC bubble of political consultancy. And then I think the second thing was super interesting that you said was with Kamala, it's not having that necessarily trust in her to show what her real positions are. It's because she only had a brief time in the Senate. And she's basically been there since Trump was in office. And during that time, she didn't have like a ton of differences in votes compared to someone like Bernie because it was only 2 years. One of which notably was the vote of sanctioning Iran, North Korea, and Russia all at the same time that put us in violation of the Iran nuclear deal. So that was like one of the only differences in their voting record. So it's people don't know who she really is because you don't really pay attention to a California district attorney all that often. And she's only been in politics for 2 years. So it's kind of a show me thing.
Well, she's only been in the Senate for 2 years. She's been a prosecutor and an AG longer than that.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Right. So I've always said it's one of those things where people knock Bernie recently on saying the same speech over and over, but I think that's a great thing. It's showing me your consistency. I know where you've stood back then. I know where you stand now. Kamala, it's just, you've been here 2 years. I don't know if I trust you yet. And I think when we see all this corporate fundraising, it raises the red flags even higher. So I tend to agree with your point there, Scotty. What do you think, Progressive Blacksmith? Do you think this trust issue is a policy thing or just the words that people are saying not being true?
Well, when it comes to that kind of stuff, I think it's a little bit 50-50. You can look at both the words and the policy, but ultimately, in the long run, policy is important. The words are just short term. That's on a micro scale. On a macro scale, you have to focus on what that person has been pushing their entire lives. Now, Bernie Sanders obviously has a great record for his entire career since he was in Congress, and then he became in the Senate in 2006. You can look at his record. Some votes he voted for some military pro-military votes when he was. I think he voted in favor of overthrowing, doing some overthrow of like Iraq in like 1998 or something. He wanted to kind of get
the
involved.
Iraq Liberation Act of '99.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I'm misrepresenting it. That's not exactly true. Your representation is much better. But he's had some votes like that, but then he's obviously had some votes where he's pushed for pushed for 3 assault weapons bans, and he's obviously pushed for universal health care, Medicare for all, whatever you want to call it, back then compared to now. But when it comes to somebody like Kamala Harris, as you guys were talking about, she obviously she ran when after Trump first got elected, and she has the same kind of strategy that Barack Obama did. Barack Obama ran for president just less than a year after he got into the Senate. And he declared around, I think right after. Obama declared in 2007, I think February of 2007. He was in the Senate since that would be barely anything. It would be really I think it was 9 months or something, less than a year. Kamala Harris is a little bit on that same timeline. She was actually earlier than that. And I don't know. I don't think she has. I think she just has the aspirations of whatever her donors believe. And I definitely can't trust her. Elizabeth Warren is a little bit different because she does have a record that is she pushed for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and then she's pushed for Wall Street reform and whatnot, but she kind of waffles on that stuff, like you said, and she brings in advisors that used to work for Hillary Clinton. I definitely don't trust that. So it's she's just not somebody that I can ultimately trust at the moment. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we'll see what happens as far as her placement in this among these field of candidates.
Yeah, I think that's been a lot of the shared sentiment in the progressive circles is we don't trust her because we've seen this AG record, and I think a lot of people don't even know who she is yet. So we'll see how long this moment in the sunshine will last. But on that note, I gotta ask, who do you guys think are actually the candidates that are just worth putting so much focus on? The people who are actually going to still be here come the year 2020 and not just running in 2019. Fernando, what do you think? Who is the actual worthwhile focus candidates?
Well, to answer one other part about you saying who will be here by 2020, it depends on why the people like Moulton are running. Are they running for malicious, just trying to handicap Bernie in the state to prevent him from getting the most delegates? Or are they running because they actually think I should be president? And I'll just go with they actually are I do want to be president and are running for not malicious reasons. Let's just give the Democrats the benefit of the doubt in that regard. So the candidates that would be the most worthy of paying attention to is unfortunately Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg. But fortunately, we also have Bernie Sanders, Andrew Yang to an extent, because Yang did recently just qualify for the 3rd and 4th debates, which is something not a lot of smaller candidates of his notoriety got. I remember back when it was still considered by Wikipedia as a minor candidate, I was the first person to actually cover Andrew Yang, and I was constantly in the comment sections of other big progressives saying, talk about Andrew Yang. He's actually pretty cool back in 2015 or something. But anyways, and I think there's gonna be one more person, but I'm not entirely sure who it'll be. And I think it'll be a single issue candidate, maybe Tulsi or Inslee. But otherwise, I don't think most of them are gonna last in that regard.
Okay, yeah, I think those are some pretty good of the fringe candidates, kind of the dark horse candidates. I think one of the interesting exclusions, and I'm wondering if it was just the memory's sake, do you think Warren's going to make it still to that 2020 point?
Warren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He kind of just blends in with most other candidates. Although, to be fair, maybe John Delaney will stay around. He was the first Democrat to announce he was running 2 years before the election. So why stop now?
Hey, I can feel that. He is a marathon runner in these debates, and it's still sad that no one knows who he is despite being the first one to run. I mean, I will give him this credit. In our polling, he is one of the 11 who made it above 1%, so he's not terrible. He's still on stage. Moulton and Bullock and all those aren't. So
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about those guys.
Yeah, and sadly, even people like Gravel, but that's more due to the fact that no one includes him on the polls, sadly. But
well, he wasn't running for the nomination. He was just running to shift the debate. So.
Yeah, but he's still a declared nominee. People were donating to him. But Scotty,
Yeah.
if Gravel's definitely not a serious candidate, as we kind of all know, he's not trying to win. He's just trying to get to the stage. Who do you really think are the people who are going to be there in 2020?
Well, I think Biden will make it to the first few primaries, but just like his previous run for president, he'll drop out early in 2020. So I think the serious candidates will be Kamala Harris, sadly, and Pete Buttigieg, sadly. And Warren and Sanders, for Bernie definitely will be a benefit to us, and Warren possibly. I think EPluribus Union, you made an interesting point about Yang, and this is one I've noticed, is that the more exposure in general, the more popular he becomes. I didn't expect him to even make the first debate because I was like, no one's going to pay attention to this guy because he has no experience. And he's just an entrepreneur selling this one idea. But then he got that large following, and unfortunately, people like Richard Spencer started jumping into the Yang gang. I think he might stick to 2020. Tulsi, especially after decimating Tim Ryan, might stay through. I think John Delaney will get Martin O'Malley'd after Iowa. If you all remember what happened to O'Malley, where he was forced to drop out because he didn't generate enough support. And honestly, I'm not sure, other than the top five and maybe Yang and Tulsi, who'd make it to 2020. Maybe Beto or Booker. But even then, it was their support has disappeared. Beto was he's the guy to take Trump. And then a few months later, it was what happened to Beto?
Yeah, I think Beto has been an interesting case of what we kind of were saying with Kamala is he was trying to just go with the meteoric rise path, I was in the House for a little bit, let me quickly turn that around and run for the Senate. Oh, I almost knocked off Ted Cruz. Let me keep rising because if I don't, it's just going to end at some point. And he kind of ran into a chainsaw of candidates like Pete Buttigieg absorbing his support, people flocking to Joe Biden, and I think he just made his case even worse with those last debates. But I got to ask, progressive Blacksmith, Keva, what do you think? Who do you think are the people that are going to actually be there come 2020? Is Beto or any of these fringes just need to give up by 2019?
So I think the people that will obviously make it are Bernie. Kamala will definitely hang around. Biden, I tend to agree with one of you guys when you said about hanging around the first couple primaries. I just think I just think Biden is on such a downward trajectory at the moment that it seems like it's going to be a little bit hard to recover. But it's possible that he could stay above water just a little bit longer. Like you said, first couple of primaries, and then it's like, that's the thing with Biden. He's never been able to maintain his consistency among, when it comes to when he's run for president. First of all, when he first ran, I think it was in 1988 was his first run, he just completely flopped because he got caught for plagiarizing. And he was plagiarizing a speech, I believe. His second time he ran against Obama and Hillary and the whole gang, John Edwards and everybody, he ran at maybe 2 or 3%. Nobody even noticed him. He was just known as the guy that, voted for the Iraq War and, voted for the Patriot Act and supported deregulation of Wall Street, typical centrist stuff. And that stuff is going to make you flame out. And I think that's what's happening with Beto. He's had a record of taking money from the heads of big oil companies, I believe it was. I think Real Sludge covered that. They did a realsludge.com. They covered that really well. And I think David Sirota also covered that really well. And I think that kind of stuff kind of screws you over. So, but obviously the obvious ones are going to be Bernie, Kamala. Warren definitely seems to be doing good because she's getting a lot of centrist support, as you guys were discussing. And I mean, I think a couple of the stragglers will be the Buttigieg, maybe Yang, just because he has that kind of interesting UBI kind of policy. But I think ultimately that'll flame out as well.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people at this point are still kind of almost feeling like they already know who it's going to be. I think we are seeing all these debates play out, and it's going to be just talking points the camps are going to use. Do you guys think that's true? Do you have a 100% certainty you know who you're going to vote for? And is there any endorsements that could potentially sway your mind during the course of this election? So what do you think, Fernando? Is there anyone that can make a difference in this race in terms of endorsements?
No, my mind's completely made up.
And who is that made up for currently?
Well, it's obviously Eric Swalwell. Why wouldn't I vote for him?
Duh.
No, but in all seriousness, it's of course the main man, Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
It has to be. Who else?
Do you think there's any endorsements that could actually help him? If it's not going to sway your mind in terms of endorsements swaying between candidates, are there any that you think are going to be big to bolster Bernie?
AOC, obviously.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big swing endorsements currently. Some people are getting a little nervous she might go to Warren camp from a lot of her friendly interactions. Scotty, do you think you're 100% set for a candidate currently? And do you think there are any meaningful endorsements still left on the table to swing this race?
I definitely think AOC could swing this race. Right now, I'm in for Bernie. But if anything were to happen to him between now and the Kansas primary, I might, depending on who's running, I might have to find an alternative to Bernie. But I strongly doubt he'd drop out by the Kansas primary, seeing how he went to the end in 2016. And so I'm all in for Bernie, unless there's that 10 to 1% chance something happens to him between now and the Kansas primary. And my vote probably won't be swayed by AOC endorsing Warren. I was like, well, if AOC endorses Warren, I got to support Warren. Or if AOC endorses whoever, I got to support that person. Or if, let's take it, my Justice Democrats, Brett Welder or James Thompson, who aren't elected officials, but they're still popular in Kansas Democratic circles. If they were to endorse someone that isn't Bernie, which I strongly doubt, I wouldn't go, well, Brett Welder endorsed this person, I got to support that person instead of Bernie. I'm in it for Bernie, so.
Yeah, I tend to agree that sometimes the value of an endorsement can be a little overblown. But do you think for the general public there are any specific endorsements beyond AOC that might be important? Or is AOC really just a swing chip on the table that can swing this race?
Well, I definitely think she is one, but let's say someone like Elizabeth Warren were to drop out, and instead of playing Machiavellian politics like she did in 2016, she actually comes out and endorses Bernie. I think a lot of the genuine progressives who support her would go for Bernie. And then the people who are like supporting her despite Bernie, like Tom Watson, will throw her under the bus and go for Kamala, which I think that's his plan this whole time. I don't think he actually supports Warren. But at the end of the day, I think anyone in this race who drops out and endorses Bernie could inherit that support. I saw this with the Republican primary in 2016 when Bush dropped out. A lot of the people I knew who supported Bush after he endorsed Rubio went for Rubio. And when Mitt Romney endorsed Cruz, a lot of those people who liked Mitt Romney in 2012 went for Cruz. A lot of the Republicans that I knew did not like Donald Trump. And in fact, one of them actually, the Republican primary was held at my high school, and one of them crossed his name out. It's like, I'm not voting for Trump. Come the very next year, it's like they have no choice. So I definitely think anyone in this primary who drops out and endorses a candidate can very well benefit or harm a candidate.
Yeah, I tend to agree that sometimes when you're literally splitting up the votes into these little camps, it really is the coalition building between the candidates currently in the race that can be the most impactful. But Kava, do you think there are any endorsements on the table that could potentially sway your vote? Are you 100% set for someone? And then are there any endorsements that could actually impact the general public's mind, in your opinion?
I'm with the rest of you, and I'm definitely pro Bernie all the way. But I definitely believe, I definitely believe that the voice of Tulsi Gabbard, and hopefully, if Mike Gravel is able to make it into one of the debates, his voice is also very valuable. So I'm definitely not swayed away from that. But I just believe that the extra voices that are either in these kind of like debates or able to be in the debates will have a great impact. Their endorsements, I think, is a little bit less. So, like an endorsement, like by Tulsi of Bernie, I don't think is going to have as much of an effect. Well, it didn't have much of an effect in 2016 because nobody knew who Tulsi was. This time around, I don't think it's going to have even as much of an effect, but it's definitely going to help get a lot of the Tulsi voters to Bernie. And I think they probably already like Bernie anyway. So a lot of these endorsements are not going to make a big deal unless it's going to be somebody like AOC, who, like you said, we don't really know what she's going to do because one second, she's, standing behind Bernie when he's doing his cancel student debt legislation in front of the Capitol, and then she's doing a video about Game of Thrones with Elizabeth Warren. So I'm kind of like, I don't know what she's doing. I guess she's just being friendly with Elizabeth Warren just to be friendly, and I guarantee you she doesn't agree with Warren being a capitalist to the bone. So, I mean, it just wouldn't make any sense for her to endorse Warren. And, we'll see what happens with the endorsements. Obviously the endorsements in this state, California, I mean, a lot of those are going to go to Kamala. Honestly, that's just, I mean, unless it's some sort of, socialist, far left people, they're going to be going to Kamala.
Yeah, I think that's already kind of been seen already. A lot of these endorsements have been coming from California, and that's why even this subject has been in the news, is because those early states are starting to have some of those endorsements. But just on that subject of AOC's kind of who we think she's going to endorse, I think this has been kind of a little bit of an anxiety in the progressive circles. I just want to know what your predictions is, because Kava just said it's definitely not going to be Warren. She'll eventually fall in line with Bernie, I believe. So, EPluribus Unum, what do you think? Is AOC going to eventually fall in line and endorse Bernie, or do you think there's a good chance she could endorse Warren?
No, I think she's probably already decided that she's going to endorse Bernie, but she's kind of just been like, because she knows she's top shit right now, so she knows, like, hey, I can play this up and make it a bigger thing if I just say I may endorse her or him. But I think inevitably she's already decided. I think most candidates and people in the House of Representatives have already decided who they want to support. They're just not open about it, which I kind of think is a bad thing. I prefer a Ro Khanna where you're just like, I'm endorsing him out of the get-go. You need to start doing the whole I may endorse him or endorse her or whoever. Also notice how Tulsi's not even on the table in regards to this because, I mean, who the hell is Tulsi Gabbard?
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't have that endorsement weight because I think, as we were kind of alluding to, a lot of those people are going to fall in line to the Bernie camp anyway if Tulsi ends up dropping out. But Scotty, do you agree with EPluribus in terms of like AOC kind of milking the time of enjoying that sway of influence at the top of the party right now and kind of waiting between Bernie and Warren, or do you think it's more of a timing thing and that's why she's doing it?
I think it's like a combination of things. I definitely agree with E on like the whole like it's just a waiting thing. But I definitely think, yeah, yes, they are. Sorry, fellas. But I definitely think like there's like a slim possibility that she might like. Yeah, but you brought up like Elizabeth Warren's capitalist to the bones. It's like
Right.
that's that could be a deterrent, but it's like I think AOC may care more about like the policy than like what people choose to label themselves as. And I still think even on that ground, she's more likely to endorse Bernie than Warren. That being said, I think it's possible that she will endorse Warren. I'm just not 100% sure the likelihood, or that she'll just play Machiavellian politics and stay out of it because she doesn't want to disrupt, quote unquote, disrupt the primary process.
Yeah.
And it all depends.
Yeah, she may play her own Warren move from 2016 and just stay out of it too.
Yeah.
That's also a potential possibility.
She is. She's gonna do that for sure. I don't. I think she's. I'm with Scotty. I'm kind of worried what she's gonna do. I don't really know.
Hey,
I'm 50-50. I'm worried that she might go towards Warren now. Scotty is correct about the whole capitalist to the bone thing. I just think that's a little bit of a that just puts a little bit of a worry in the back of my head when she says that. I know the policies matter. Of course, policies is everything that progressives should be worrying about. I've always emphasized that myself. But when it comes to her saying that and then AOC kind of coddling up with her a little bit, it worries me because it's like, okay, well, if you're a democratic socialist, don't you see it as a problem for somebody to be going out there and saying I'm capitalist to the bone, and then you're going and playing you're playing a little bit of footsie with all the corporatist type donors out there. I mean, she's going and having conversations with Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan, if I remember correctly, and she's going to have these meetings with all these kind of corporatist type CEOs from different companies. I mean, that's a problem. I just don't see how she can be trusted by the progressive community.
yeah, I think that definitely can raise some flags, her influence in terms of the money aspect of her financing of her campaign. But I think we kind of have been like alluding to this central point of a lot of minds are probably already made up, but people are milking it and playing politics, waiting around to give an endorsement. So I'm curious currently, are there any candidates in the current field that you would either leave the party or not vote for if they were nominated? At least of the serious contenders that we kind of named earlier. Fernando, is there anyone like that you would start considering alternative parties like the third parties out there like the Green Party or just simply not voting?
Well, if the Democratic Party nominates a corporatist or a centrist, neoliberal, whatever you want to call them, I'm voting the Green Party. And I know I'm going to get, and I know Cenk Uygur, if he's watching this, is going to be like, oh, what? You can't do that. You got to vote for Joe Biden. You're crazy. I take more of a Jimmy Dore route in regards to voting and a Eugene V. Debs route. I would rather vote for someone that I want and not get it than vote for someone I don't want and get it.
Yeah, I think that's especially a bold take, given that you had mentioned before that you're in one of those swing states. I think that is one of the interesting things about our electoral college is it kind of gives us all these different incentives of how we would even consider our threshold of acceptability for candidates. Like, for me, I'm in New Jersey, safely blue. I can have kind of a higher tolerance potentially than someone who is in a barely red state or a complete purple state. So I'm curious, Scotty, what do you think about that being from a red state? What's your list of people that you would consider voting for a third party instead, or maybe not even voting?
Well, I think for me, the red state does help. Like, well, if I can say Biden is the nominee and he's pulling at 3%, there's like no point in voting for Biden. So I like consider voting for a third party to help get them to that 5%. But let's say Biden's the nominee and he actually has like it's a 50-50 between Trump and Biden. I might have to go, well, Biden's going to do all this. He's not going to advance the way I would like, but Trump will like regress further back than Biden would. And it's like, I don't want some of these horrible things that we're already seeing with Trump to continue and get worse in the second year of Trump. Like the horrid things Bush did continued and got worse in his second year. So I might have to bite the bullet if Biden pulls it, if it's a 50-50, and vote for Biden because I can see that Trump is a real danger now. I don't think Biden's the candidate who could win over Kansas because if you look at Kansas's electoral history, only 3 Democrats have ever won Kansas. Those were Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, and Lyndon Johnson, and those were all landslide victories. And I don't think Biden is a landslide guy. I don't even think he'll even make it to the end, much less win a landslide victory. So
Yeah, that makes a
that
lot of
being
sense to me.
said, I think it's most likely that if one of these centrist types wins, it'll be 97% Trump, 3% like it was in 2016. So I think right now I'm saying safest vote. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I kind of agree with him there that there's going to be this political calculus based on when our primary is, what the odds are, and these are some of the weird impacts that an electoral college has. Is like, does my state even matter? Do I need to show up? What's the polling predictors? Rather than it being, as we've kind of alluded to, of eliminating the electoral college, a popular vote. So it's just straight turn up. It doesn't matter of your state alignment. So I think also interestingly, we've both named Biden so far as the people where we're thinking about that Green Party leave. I'm curious, Kava, do you agree that it's just Biden who is the person that would potentially cause a Democratic exit, or is there more to this field that has a chance that could cause that as well?
Oh, there's multiple. There's Kamala, there's Warren to some extent, there's Biden, Buttigieg, if Beto somehow manages to get in there, get a lot higher in the polls and, possibly be the nominee. There's so many bad options. Even Julian Castro, who is not doing terrible right now. I mean, as far as rhetoric, he's not doing terrible, but he's still not somebody I can really trust. I voted for the Green Party in 2016, so
Okay.
I was a full Green Party person. I was actually the first time I voted Green Party. So and I did not vote in the midterms in 2014.
Yeah.
In 2018, I did vote. So
I don't.
there's a lot of candidates out there that are going to make me want to
I'm done.
get away from them and just go with the Green Party vote for sure.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of sentiment that at least people who are in the Bernie camp are really riding for Bernie or die, essentially. I'm curious, is there anyone outside of Bernie for this group here that you are going to be willing to vote for? Or is it really Bernie is the guy, or we're going to have to start the Green Party progressing? What do you think, Fernando? Is it Bernie or bust, or is it we got to go further than that?
Well, if you know from our last episode, there's quite a few people that I could see myself voting for. I mean, to be fair, one of them has changed. It's pretty much Bernie, Tulsi, for the sake of argument, Gravel, even though we all know he's dropping out in like the 16th. Elizabeth Warren, Yang, Williamson, and I've replaced Jay Inslee with Bill de Blasio. Even though he did endorse Hillary, I still think on substance he's more actually progressive in a lot of regards. So it's really just progressive or bust, not specifically Bernie.
Yeah, I think that's kind of ideologically aligned for at least what we've been trying to aim for. We're a policy-focused movement. So if you're aligned with our policies and you actually mean it, we'll show up for you. So I'm curious, Scotty, who of that group are you willing to vote for if they become the nominee?
Well, if let's say it's Warren, Tulsi, Gravel's probably dropping out soon, so not him, but Williamson, Yang, Inslee, or de Blasio, I could see myself voting for them. I know that they all have their flaws, and I'm not afraid to call them out. As Farron Cousins says, you're never going to get that candidate who's, yeah, yeah. Excuse me 1 second.
So yeah, Keva, what do you think? What's your group of people
Okay.
that you're willing to
I'll be
vote
back
for
in a
if that's the actual nominee?
I'm Bernie or bust. I'm Bernie. Well, I'm Bernie or Green. I would say I'm definitely Bernie or Green. Like I said, I voted for Green until 2016. I voted for Bernie in the primaries. I'm pretty hardline Bernie, and I can't, and I would definitely vote for Tulsi Gabbard, to be fair, but I just know that she doesn't have much of a chance. So, but if we want to, we want to play that game, we can assume that, and we assume that Tulsi makes it. I would definitely vote for her. But any of those other candidates, I don't care how progressive they sound. That doesn't mean anything to me. I need to ultimately see what the policies are that they really what I believe they believe in, and then also
All right.
what their records are. And the records of people like de Blasio and Warren and Kamala and those kind of people, I just don't trust them. Mike Gravel is good too, so Gravel, obviously another person that doesn't have much of a chance, but if he had a chance, obviously I would vote for him too. And he actually was debating in the 2008 debate, if I remember correctly. And he was taking Hillary and Biden and all of them to task on, I think it was foreign policy. So he's still very consistent. So, but the rest of them, they're not, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think my list kind of falls somewhere in between the two that's kind of been named so far. Like, we had EPluribus kind of name a little bit of a longer list going out to like the Insleys potentially, the de Blasios, the Williamsons. I think that's going to come down to the very end, me thinking, okay, do I want to show the support of a truly big victory against Trump, because it's not going to matter in New Jersey anyway? Or is it going to be kind of reserving it down to that kind of like core four, if we're counting Gravel, five, of like Warren, Yang, Tulsi, and then especially Bernie, obviously, if he won. But I think it's kind of interesting. We've all said we are not going to be sitting around and not voting. I think that is great that we all know we got to at least show some support somewhere. So I'm curious, what's your position on how much of a need there is for a third party currently? EPluribus Unum, I know this is kind of a subject you do a lot over on your channel, is discussing third party type movements. How much do you see a need for a third party versus just a simply new second party movement, like a reform of the Democratic Party?
Well, we need a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. We need pretty much every ideology should have its own party, because that way hey, if you want to vote for the socialists, don't vote in the Democratic primary because they're not socialists. They're neoliberals. Go vote for the Socialist Party. I mean, but to be fair, of course, that's not really going to happen unless a lot of people put boots on the ground. So we need at least some kind of third party movement, whether it be even ones that I don't necessarily agree with. Like, if the Libertarians were able to win a couple of seats in the Senate or the House, go ahead, let's go. We need to show the two major parties, like, if you're not actually going to adhere to the ideology, we'll go somewhere else. And that will inevitably lead to, to be fair, the idea of taking over the two major parties, it can work. We had the Tea Party with the more libertarian or far-right conservatives try to take over, and it succeeded. And we have the Justice Democrats doing somewhat of a fair job. But
Our revolution.
Yeah, and our revolution as well. But if you go to a third party and show that the third party can have momentum, at the very least, the two major parties will have to realize, oh shit, we gotta actually talk to our base and do what they want us to do, or else they'll go somewhere else. And that's the biggest problem that we have. The Democrats can shit all over progressivism as much as they want, because at the end of the day, the progressives are probably still going to vote for them. They can say, okay, we're going to pass PAYGO. What are you going to do, AOC? You're still going to vote for me for speaker. That's what inevitably is going to go down.
Yeah, I think that's very true. My one concern kind of with third party movements that go beyond a third party and going into a fourth and a fifth and a sixth party is you kind of run into similar problems of what you have in markets with consolidation. If you have a Republican Party that doesn't splinter into all these different ideologies and they just stay strong, and the Democratic Party splinters into all these different paths of socialist, neoliberal, conservative Democrat, etc., it's going to be really easy for the Republicans to steamroll us. And I think that's what a lot of people who try and vote shame people who do try and support the Green Party try and do on this small scale. Do you think it's sustainable to have so many parties? EPluribus Unum, do you think that it's sustainable to have that many parties?
Well, go around the world, pretty much every country has like 5 or 6 major parties, and they do just fine. And you might say, well, that's a parliamentary system, or that's a parliamentary system. What about Mexico? Mexico has the exact same electoral system as us. A president, a senate, a house, and they have like 5 major parties, and they do just fine. They form coalitions. They work together.
Yeah.
And I mean, not all coalitions work as well. Like, in the most recent Mexican presidential election, 2 left-wing parties teamed up with the biggest right-wing party, and a far-right party teamed up with the biggest left-wing party. So the coalitions can just be whatever you want, as long as you have common goals, and give the third parties a chance. Inevitably, the world will be better, because we'll be more ideologically pure in some regards.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, as you kind of pointed out, at least in a lot of other countries, Mexico may be excluded, we have these different electoral systems that can help facilitate that. So I'm curious, Scotty, do you think there is a need right now for third, fourth party systems, or do we have to wait until we can get some of these electoral reforms to start pushing for those types of things?
Well, I think there's like a combination of factors at hand. I think one of the big things right now is none of the third parties have like someone strong enough that's known enough that could shift the debate. I mean, Ron Paul right now is a libertarian, but I don't see him running for office any day that could shift the Republicans in more of a libertarian direction, considering that 1, his son is a Republican senator, 2, he was an elected Republican. And the Green Party, I think, 1, it's viewed as like a single issue party, even though there are more platforms it has, but since it's called the Green Party, it's typically thought of, oh, it's a single issue environmental party.
Yeah.
So people like dismiss it. And also they don't have someone strong that could shift the Democratic Party. They don't have like in 1912, Theodore Roosevelt started the Progressive Party to push the Republican Party left. And so that affected the whole political landscape, and the Democratic Party saw this progressive insurgency and started adopting progressive platforms into their party. And that's where we got Franklin Roosevelt. And we saw a similar thing in 1948. There were 2 splinters from the Democratic Party. There was the Dixiecrats, who wanted the Democrats to be this Trumpist right-wing party. And then there were the progressives who wanted to push Truman back into a more leftist direction than he already was, but back to like the Roosevelt direction. And then the Dixiecrats wanted to be, the party of racism. And then there was the American Independence Party in 1968, which is why the Republican Party started pandering to those voters, since the Democratic Party started losing a lot of those right-wing voters. And that's where we got the Republican Party there is today. But those parties all had someone that was high profile. In 1912, it was Theodore Roosevelt. In 1948, it was Henry Wallace and Strom Thurmond. And in 1968, it was George Wallace. So I think the third parties need someone high profile enough that voters will say, oh, I know who that is. I wonder why he left this party. As a 2016 Johnson voter who actually believed in the libertarian nonsense, I can say it's very hard to get voters behind a candidate that's barely known, and plus his only media coverage is whenever he plugs and gaffes. And so I think they need someone more high profile.
Yeah,
Libertarians may be getting a mosh soon.
Yeah.
Or Sam Cedar.
Yeah.
Or Sam Cedar. Yeah, I was going to say that one too. So I'm curious.
I'd actually vote for Sam Cedar if he wins.
Depends who the nominee is. But I'm curious, Kava, kind of through these topics, like of discussing the need for a third party, do you think it's the lack of it currently is a lack of well-known figure, kind of like what Scotty was saying? Is it really just we need to have an electoral reform to be able to have that? What do you think is the real reason we are lacking a third party representation?
That's a tough one to figure out because electoral reform is something that we've been trying to do for years now. Especially when it comes to voter disenfranchisement and obviously back in the days of Ralph Nader and Ross Perot, those days were the Green Party, the whatever party Ross Perot was part of, they were trying to get involved, and the Democrats and Republicans teamed up together and basically weeded them out, and they did a very good job of that. To be fair, to be fair to them, they did a good job of getting those people out, and now they can't even get a third party or a fourth party person on there unless they have some sort of like 5% above 5%,
15% to get on.
15%. That's crazy. That is nuts.
Yep, the Commission of Presidential Debates for you.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's amazing when Republicans and Democrats always talk about how they hate each other, but then they team up on this kind of stuff. But to answer your question, I think it's listen, when it comes to personality, that's a big factor. I hate the idea of like going based on the personality or / identity of the person. But ultimately, you need to find somebody that is going to be able to stand out. I mean, look at AOC. AOC is somebody that, we might not all agree with every single thing that she says, but she does fit that identity of that person who is a quote-unquote democratic socialist. And she definitely gets a lot of people's attention. She's a woman of color. She's young and everything. If the Green Party, Libertarian Party needs to kind of get that. They need to kind of go in that direction a little bit to try and get people's attention, but ultimately the policy is the important thing. So we'll see what happens, but unfortunately personality matters. And look at Trump. I mean, Trump is somebody that's completely loathsome, and he's a maniac, and he's a lunatic, but he goes out there and he comes up with good one-liners, he shoots from the hip, he claims he's not bought out by the, selling out to the corporatist donors, even though he is, and he's giving
received $30 million from the NRA.
Exactly. So he is not who he claims he is, but he sells himself really, really well. And it doesn't matter what kind of tweet he puts out there. It doesn't matter what kind of crazy shit he says. Ultimately, it just comes down to people, liking that he is different than all these other robotic candidates, and that's why people love Bernie. That's the goal. You have to be real, and if you're not real, you're not going to get really far, honestly.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you gotta have someone's ear first before you can implant knowledge into someone's head. You can't sell any ideas unless you can first say, "Oh, maybe I want to listen to this person." So yeah. I tend to agree. We need someone to rally behind.
And I just want to say real quick, Trump is somebody that was always of the opinion that, listen, if I get bad marketing, if I get bad attention, that's fine. At least I got attention, right? It doesn't matter. Bad attention, good attention, people are listening to me. Like you said, they've got that person's ear, whoever it is.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that point. So I'm curious. We've all kind of said that the Green Party has really been lacking these factors. They don't have a true identity. Their branding might be a little off, being just known for just environmental policies. So I'm curious, do you guys think that the third party movement is going to be an existing third party like the Green Party, or do you think it's going to be something we haven't seen at all? Or are we going to still have this two-party system come 10 or 20 years in the future? What do you think, Fernando? What do you think about that?
Well, like everyone said, there has to be a figure to get the third party noticed in order for it to actually happen. Otherwise, all we're really going to see is the Republicans get more and more libertarian-ish in their philosophy, and the Democrats getting more and more greenish with their philosophy, especially when you take into account the fact, to be a bit morbid, the corporatists and the establishment people of both parties are old and they're going to die soon. So the younger people like Like, I mean, I know that there were a couple of Republicans that I knew in my high school that they actually took a more libertarian stance on a lot of things, and that's inevitably going to do well. And while I would like for there to have the Greens to get their candidate out there and get well known, and as well as the Libertarians, it's probably not going to happen, and we're probably going to be stuck with this two-party system for at least a while because it's been 200 years. So, again, why stop now?
Fair, fair. So I'm curious, Scotty, do you think within like 10 to 20 years we're going to see the emergence of any third party having, significant sway on our national elections?
I think one of the big things that has to happen is we have to have a reform on our elections that helps them get out there and get their message out. Because right now,
Scotty? Got cut off there. So let's go to Keva. I'm curious on what your thoughts are in terms of the need for these third parties to actually pop up within like this 10 to 20 year period. Do you think it's going to be reforms of these parties to actually progress these causes forward? Or do you think we're going to have to actually leave these party structures?
I think the chances of the third parties, whether it's Libertarian, Green, Constitution Party, whatever you want to name it, I think it's a high possibility. Right, not right now, but if I'm looking at it right now, do I see it happening in the next maybe 10, more like 20 years? Yes, because I think people are truly getting sick of this two-party system. I mean, look at the approval for Congress right now. It's like 10%. It's like hovers between 10 and 15%. Kyle from Secular Talk talks about that all the time, and it's something that people are just getting tired of, and we don't really. I mean, we're getting to the point of where we just want to burn this whole thing down. We want to blow this whole thing up. Justice Democrats is fine. I mean, I get their goal, their end goal is good, but I don't know if you can always trust those candidates to be truly progressive as they claim they are. And when you throw your weight behind a specific party, it doesn't really get very far. You have to focus on what the policies are. And the policies of certain parties are, obviously the Democrats and Republicans, they're so invested into their corporate donors, you can't trust what they're going to do, and ultimately they're just going to be working together to screw everybody else over. So if you have, it's all about the money. If you have candidates that are not, focusing on getting that sweet corporate cash, then you can actually get somewhere. And the reform of that, of the political system as far as when it comes to money and politics, that's the big factor here. And once we can do that, I think we can get somewhere. But until then, nothing's going to change. And that could happen. We'll see. That aspect, that whole getting money out of politics, I think the debate has definitely slowed down a lot more. It hasn't been in the mainstream very much. But, do we have any candidates really talking about that? Maybe Elizabeth Warren and Bernie, but that's it. Other than that, not really.
Yeah, I tend to agree that we need to have some electoral reforms in place first before we can have any of these types of movements outside of the party. I think we saw that potentially occurring with the For the People Act this congressional session, but it really didn't actually go anywhere because I think it's sometimes we're forcing these parties to work against their best interests because it's going to incentivize splintering, which is just going to hurt the establishment parts of it. But I think we've all acknowledged that there's this pain of trust within the party structure. So I'm curious what you guys would kind of give as a grade currently for the Democratic Party, as well as what they could do by the end of this year to actually improve that grade. So I'm curious, Fernando, what do you think is the current state of the Democratic Party's grade?
Well, if I were to give them a letter grade, all you'd have to do is look up their logo, a D. So the only thing that they could really do to improve it is actually start moving lefter, like they start moving left. a big way to do it would be for a progressive to actually try for speaker, like Ro Khanna, or I'll even take Barbara Lee, for example. Just you gotta move more left for their grade to go up, pretty much.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely an indicator in our leadership spots. I think we're not going to really be able to move much in terms of this party until we get a new speaker. Nancy Pelosi is probably not going to be equipped to progress a progressive movement. So I'm curious, Scotty, if you're back there and the audio got resolved. What do you think is the current grade for the Democratic Party, and what could be done to improve that?
You hear me first?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. So one of the things, I think I'd give him more of like a C or C minus, because I think one thing I will give him credit for is fighting back against Trump. But other than that, they're not really good at like pushing like great policies. Like Nancy Pelosi has been dismissive of the Green New Deal and Medicare for All, and Chuck Schumer. He's been, I don't even know what he's been up to, honestly. He might actually be worse than Pelosi, but I think when it came to like issues like the government shutdown, they were not going to compromise on Trump, which I think that was great of them. But however, they're not really pushing back any harder, and I think they should move left into a Bernie Sanders direction to say, we're the complete opposite of Trump, and this is why, and if Trump vetoes like this or this, it'll be on him, and that's why you should elect one of our guys. And so I think they need to really push not just against Trump, but as against like moneyed interest and Wall Street and everything behind the Republicans.
Yeah, so I'm curious, is that a concrete action that needs to come from like the Nancy Pelosi's of the party of the current leadership? Are we needing it to be like voices that are coming from the progressive end pushing against the Democratic leadership? What could really actually bump up that grade potentially by the end of this year before we have like a nominee?
I think like either Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer need to step down and let someone else take over, or they need to recognize that this movement within their party that's left wing is bigger than they think it is, and they need to say, okay, we're done fighting you on this. We're going to get behind you because we really need to get rid of this guy and stop this guy, Trump, that being. And so I think if Schumer and Pelosi were either to step down and someone progressive were to step up and replace them, that would bump up their letter game. Or if Schumer and Pelosi would budge left and go, okay, we're done fighting back. Let's do this and push back against Trump effectively, like a Bernie Sanders way. So those are like two things that, to me, that would bump up the grade.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We need actual real action that shows pushback. While we have Trump, we're going to be very unlikely to get anything done due to the veto pen as well as the Senate makeup currently. So it's going to be kind of hard to do anything on the policy front while that situation is occurring. So I'm curious, Kava, like where do you think we are currently as a Democratic Party? And is there anything that can be done by the end of this year that can actually improve the grades for that party?
I think the current state of the Democratic Party is not good at all. If I were to give them a grade, I would be nice, and I would probably give them a D+, only because of the emergence of AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and Ro Khanna and a couple of those, other people, also Justice Democrats kind of being in there. But Justice Democrats and those people they're not enough. It's just not enough to get the Democrats over the hump because they're such a small. They're only 6 people now. To be fair, as Kyle from Secular Talk has talked about, AOC has 4.5 million followers on Twitter, and that's a big deal. Twitter is obviously a big deal. She gets a lot of attention on Instagram as well. So I think it's a lot more representation than the Democrats want to portray. But ultimately, it does come down to what the number in the actual caucus is. And if the number is that small, unfortunately, it's not going to make that much of an impact. That's just the reality of it, politically at least. and as far as getting your talking points out there. But as far as the end of the year and everything, I think things can, and so like I think the first primary is in January, I think in Iowa. So if we can get to the end of the year and kind of push more of those AOC, the Ilhan Omar type policies a little bit harder, I think the status of the party will get a little bit better because right now we're going nowhere. I mean, honestly, the Democrats are fighting their way out of quicksand right now. Look at this anti-immigration bill that they just voted in favor of. They did no zero protections for children that are being captured, in the detention centers. They're still keeping them in cages. The border little detention centers are, so they're still keeping them in cages. They're not treating them any different. People are still dying on the border trying to cross over, and the Democrats just give in. They capitulate. They do what the Republicans do, and they've been doing that ever since Bush was in office, essentially. And
It might even go back to Reagan.
yeah, exactly. I was born in '86.
Hashtag the resistance.
Exactly. Yeah, the assistance. Really. I mean, that's ultimately what it is. But as many progressives have pointed out. But I was born in '86, so I don't know a ton about Reagan. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were as capitulating as back then too. But it's just so bad right now. It's terrible. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is so incompetent. I just don't know what she's doing. And like you said, Schumer could be worse, but you just don't hear from Schumer very much. Schumer he seems like
the Republicans still control the Senate, so.
Exactly, but I'm saying like as far as Schumer's role, as far as being in the negotiations and stuff, he seems to stay a little bit more behind the scenes a little bit. He seems to just do whatever Pelosi wants, whereas Pelosi is more in front of everybody, kind of out in the open. But then she still capitulates and she still gives in. She did the same exact thing under George W. Bush when giving him funding for the Iraq War, when the Democrats and progressives at that time were demanding to not do it. She was still doing it. And she's a horrible speaker. I mean, honestly, that's all I have to say. And as long as she's around, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Sounds like a threat.
We're not going to get anywhere. I mean, we need to get rid of her.
Hey, I totally understand.
Just report this to the FBI for 1 second.
But it's serious. We do need some change in our leadership because I think one of the biggest trends that's always shown is when we're out of power, we are, as we try and say, resistance types, even though we won't punish people who break party lines, like Schumer is famous for doing, of not giving anyone grief. But I think
when Joe Manchin voted to confirm Kavanaugh.
Yeah, exactly.
Did he? Yeah. True,
yeah. So when we're out of power, we don't punish people.
On top of that.
But then, when we're in power, we start acting like we're Republicans, essentially. Yeah, well, let's put hampers on ourselves already. Let's do pay-go. These things where when we're out of power, we're just kind of looking like a whining party. And when we're in power, we're governing from the right solely. It's kind of this, do something to serve your own base, finally.
Didn't AOC didn't she support the coup of Venezuela?
I think she gave some dancing around the edges language. I think it left a lot of people upset, though, kind of.
I think it was she acknowledged the brutality of Maduro, and a lot of people interpret that as an endorsement of oh, let's overthrow Maduro.
Yeah. Well, she was pretty strong on Palestine. I think it was before she was put into Congress. So after she won, they asked her, "So what do you think about obviously the brutality of everything that's going regarding Israel's treatment of Palestinians and then kind of apartheid and everything?" So she said, "Yeah, it's terrible." And then she kind of walked it back a little bit, and then she was kind of like, "Well, we need to work with Israel a little bit better here and there." So seemed like she was dancing around that as well. So you could be right, but it's a little bit too much dancing for me.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the thing for a lot of the people in the party. It's this gut check, trust but verify. We need to see some policy finally get done and us finally get served. So I think
we a litmus test.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we did a good job kind of summarizing where we are kind of as a party and where we need to be going forward. But before I let you guys go, I kind of want to do what we've been doing here for all of our Me Plus 3 segments, doing our wrap-up round of the 3-on-3, where I'm going to be just asking you guys a multiple choice question, 3 of them, where it's going to be 3 policies that come from the platform that I have. And so one question is going to be coming from the Upgrade Democracy section. The second will be from the Create an Ethical, Efficient, and Educated Economy section. And the third is going to be Leading Peace and Sustainability at Home and Abroad. So in each, you're going to get 3 policies to choose between. You have to choose which you think is the highest priority we need to focus on, or none of the above. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
So the first choice of policy for the Upgrading Democracy section is, would you rather have ranked choice voting? Would you rather have all elected congressional officials as well as the president must divest from all of their investments in another country, as well as they can't hold any equity in specific businesses or industries? Or finally passing the For the People Act, which is going to allow getting money out of politics with things like overturning Citizens United and publicly financing elections. So I'll go with you first, Fernando. Which of those do you think is the biggest priority we need to do to actually be able to upgrade our democracy? Or do you think we should be doing none of those?
Ranked choice voting would be best because it would inevitably end the so-called spoiler effect. And as we saw in Maine, it works rather effectively, albeit they elected Jared Golden, who's not the most progressive guy ever. I learned the hard way. But, I mean, ranked choice voting would probably be the best.
Okay. So what do you think, Scotty? What do you think is the most important step for us to try and upgrade our democracy? Was it the ranked choice voting, the divesting from investments for Congress as well as the president, or is it passing the For the People Act so we can get some publicly financed elections?
I would like to say all of the above, but I think For the People Act of those 3 is definitely the best. Because if we get money out of politics, we'll see politicians they can't take money from these special interests to help sway how they govern. So I think it would make our elected officials represent us more as opposed to moneyed interests.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Getting the corrupting power of money out of our politics is a really important thing. So, Kava, what do you think? Do you agree with either EPluribus Unum or Scotty here? Or are you going to go with the divestment plan?
I agree with Scotty. I think obviously ranked choice voting is definitely important. There's no doubt about it. I think, but I'm more in the camp of getting money out of politics. I think that's really, really important. And it's something that clearly has a big role in, swaying, not public opinion, of course, because it's not our opinions, but it's the opinions of the politicians, and then the opinions they put out sway us, not us, but random people out there who are not very educated, but they listen to their politicians and like, oh yeah, that's great. We have to, deregulate Wall Street because it helps with. It helps with more freedom and more, ability to, give people the freedom to do what they want, the way they put that spin on it. That kind of stuff, it's bullshit, obviously, and we can't let those talking points get out there, and we can't let the politicians be corrupted, or else they're going to just keep, taking us down the rabbit hole, and we can't afford to do that anymore. So I'm definitely on the get money out of politics train for sure.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that front being more important because until we can get people more aligned to the actual average American compared to corporate interests, they're never going to purposely make it harder for themselves to get elected by having ranked choice voting, which might make it easier for a third party to win seats. So until we can get them aligned to just make fairer elections just because they're aligned with people's interests, I think it's kind of hard to even achieve ranked choice voting. So I think
I just like ranked choice voting though. I do like that for the
for sure
party aspect for sure. I mean, we need more third parties, as Fernando was talking about, and it needs to happen. I mean, that's just we're not going to get anywhere if we don't. I mean, that's why I love the parliamentary system in the UK and all those other countries, Australia. I think we need a parliamentary system.
divestment is important because we can't
Yeah.
have conflict of interest. Carter had to sell his peanut farm.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that's more of an issue now that Trump is in office. So it's not that. It's not that. It's not like that's not something that's affecting us terribly over the I don't know however many years, but it's much more like a Trump effect for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's very important that before we can really get any of these progressive policies that we want for like impacting people's lives directly, like healthcare or the environment, we first got to get kind of all of these fine tunings of our political system aligned first. So
Yeah.
I'm curious now that we kind of move on to the, you know, ethical, efficient, and educated economy section. Which of these policies you guys think is the most important to push forward? So the first choice is ending right to work laws so that people can more readily join unions and aren't feeling like they're pressured to not join them. Do you think it's more important that we put a Wall Street speculation tax on these options type of trading so that every time they're speculating on these trades, there's going to be a 1% tax that occurs on them? Or do you think we should be ending all subsidies to publicly traded companies? So I'll start with you, Fernando. Which of those three do you think would be the best at helping us get to an ethical, efficient, and educated economy?
It's a little bit of a hard choice
Yeah.
for right to work laws and the second one, but I'd say the second one, Wall Street speculation tax, would probably be a whole lot better in the grand scheme of things because, with all that tax money, you can spend it on stuff, like Medicare for all, or for example, or whatever. But I do understand the importance of ending right to work laws, for example.
Yeah, I think they're two sides of the coin. One's kind of funding the government, and the other is kind of our labor rights. So they're both kind of important tasks. So I'm curious, Scotty, of those three choices of the ending right to work laws, the Wall Street speculation tax, or ending subsidies for publicly traded companies, where do you line as the top priority that we need to focus on?
Well, I think we should end subsidies for public traded companies because one of the reasons these companies have so much influence is that we give them money, they give us money for more subsidies, and so it's like a revolving door. And if we were to cut that revolving door off, we'd see less of this corruption that takes place because of the revolving door.
Okay. And now I'm curious, Kava, do you have, again, an agreement with EPluribus Unum? Do you agree with Scotty this time, or do you think it's more important that we have the ending of the right of work laws?
Yeah, that's a tough choice to make between those multiple choice options. But I would have to go with the divesting of the subsidies to the multinational corporations essentially. So like, for example, like ExxonMobil getting $500 million, from our government. That's huge. That's something that, talk about waste of money. That's just not something that needs to be allowed because the amount of money that we spend on just our military industrial complex, the obviously the student debt that we're in, the student loan debt and everything. There's just, it's all piling up on top of on top of each other, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. I do love the taxing of the Wall Street speculation, but I think the definitely the divestment from the corporations is a much bigger deal for sure.
Yeah, I think
And that's
it's.
just yeah.
I tend to think that it's a double-edged sword here in terms of
Yeah.
what's more important. Is it more important to fund the government and make sure we can have more programs, or is it more important that we can actually have a fair market out in the public in terms of labor laws as well as corporate competition? I think they're all pretty equally important things, but I tend to lean on just having a fair marketplace. We can't have people be bought off, get a subsidy, then use that subsidy money to give shareholders more money,
Yeah.
and then buy that influence again and again and again. So I think
Yeah.
that's potentially where I would probably land if I had to choose. But I support all these ideas, obviously,
Yeah,
and bringing them
of course.
forward. So then the last section that I have is trying to lead a more peaceful and sustainable future both at home and abroad. So the choices that I have for you guys there is, what do you think is most important? Body cameras on all police, reinstating DACA with a pathway to citizenship, or requiring all wars to have multilateral agreement or action and a clearly defined victory. So I'll go again, same order. Fernando, what do you think between those three options? What will help us lead a more sustainable and peaceful future?
Well, considering I don't want people to drink out of the toilets, I'd probably have to go with reinstating DACA and making a pathway to citizenship. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm Hispanic. I have no stuff in this because I'm a legal citizen. I was born here. I don't look like it, but I was. But I'd say DACA and that kind of stuff would probably be better, especially considering the last choice just is pretty much like we get permission to go to war rather than just no war in general.
Okay, yeah, I hear that, especially with all that's going on in terms of it being literally concentration camp. Making some movement on that humanitarian crisis could be very important. So, Scotty, do you agree with Fernando that the most important of those to lead a peaceful and sustainable future is reinstating DACA? Or do you think that body cameras on all police or having multilateral agreement and a clearly defined victory for war is more important?
Oh, I'm in agreement with Fernando here. I think it's definitely, especially right now, with the things are that we reinstate DACA as well as just completely reform our immigration system. So a lot of these undocumented people it's easier for them to come here legally and become citizens and escape the harsh conditions that they run from that we cause. I think the third option, I'm not sure how we accomplish that. That would require international politics, and so I'm with Fernando here.
So, Kava, do you agree with both Fernando and Scotty that reinstating DACA is the most important of the options? Or do you think body cameras on all police or having more multilateral agreement and clear conditions to war is more important?
I'm going to make it 3 for 3 and say DACA is definitely the best choice out of those three options. I don't think, as Fernando said, I don't think what's the point of, essentially laying out why we're going to war, and that's not really going to do anything. If your question was just kind of ending the wars and just kind of, getting out of that would be a different story. Now, when it comes to the body cameras, I think that's the same idea. So you just want to put a body camera on the police, and then what? We're going to get a nice view of the cop killing that black dude that did nothing. So ultimately, that's not going to do anything for us in the long run. That is the current situation, obviously, and you can't change that. But and it is a decent idea to have the body camera on there. It's better than nothing. But I'm of the view that you need to go as far as possible when pushing for these kind of things, like when it comes to not just body cameras. It needs to be like a full kind of reform as far as the police, the police state. It's just horrible. I mean, we have militarized cops these days, pretty much, as we saw in after the Michael Brown situation happened in Missouri. He got killed, and all of a sudden, all these military tanks and shit were all over the city there where he got killed. I forgot the name of where he got killed in Missouri, but yeah, definitely DACA is a big deal because of all the things that's happening at the border. Definitely need to, legalize, tax and regulate all these drugs that the cartels are essentially fighting over. And if we can do that, I think we can definitely get somewhere.
Yeah, I tend to have to agree with all three of you. This action actually impacts lives, changes it dramatically from being, in a concentration type environment. But I think that the bigger deal is that it's not just oversight, but it's action. And I think that's kind of what we've all kind of been saying here. So I tend to agree with you. So thank you all for coming on today. before we all leave, I just want to give you all a chance to shout out what you guys have kind of going on in your lives currently. So, Fernando, do you want to tell the Rosebuds out there what you have going on and where to check you out?
Well, just go to my YouTube channel, just EPluribus Unum. If this is visual, you'll see what my icon looks like, but if not, it's just a little fist with a microphone in it. And you'll see all my latest videos and stuff. Go to my website and you'll see who I'm endorsing for office. Go to my Twitter and you'll see me whine and complain. So just do all that. My Twitter is EPluribusUnumYT, by the way.
Cool. Thank you for letting everyone know how to find you there. So, Scotty, I'm curious. What do you have there for the folks to go check out?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at ScottySackham97. You can also follow me on Instagram, same @name, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's just Scotty Cameron. Look for the Scotty from Star Trek icon. That's my YouTube channel. And you could follow me on Comic Vine and Giant Bomb to see what I think of the latest comic book movie or video game, those sites. And so you can check my stuff out there. My YouTube channel, I try to at least upload something. I upload like top 10s or me talking about politics or movie reviews or stuff like that. So
Very cool. Yeah, you guys should all check out those two so far. And Kava, do you want to tell them what they conclude on watching?
Yeah, you guys can check me out on YouTube, youtube.com/ProgBlacksmith. I also have a Periscope, which is periscope.tv/ProgBlacksmith1, number 1. And I'm also on Podbean, progblacksmith.podbean.com. And I have a Patreon page, patreon.com/ProgBlacksmith.
Great. So yeah, guys, please make sure you go check out all of their channels. What we're really trying to do here is build up more independent progressive voices. We're not just trying to hear from just the pundits, but everyday people. So supporting us, smaller YouTubers collectively, is one of the best ways we can have more voices be heard. I know I learned a lot from the group today, so thank you all for coming on. I really enjoyed this, and I'm hoping that we can have you guys on as well. Some other stuff that you guys should also check out that we have currently going on the channel is we're still running strong with our Terrific Tuesday poll. We're trying to still get you all to give us your inputs on grading all of the 24 candidates. We've kind of disregarded Joe Sestak for the time being because the effort to include him and the impact he'll have on the race is going to be negligible. So let's forget he even exists. We have 1,063 of you going strong currently voting, and we want to just keep pushing this forward into all the future months. With that, my friends, that's going to do it here for us at the Hill of Roses. Until next time, stay rosy.